Hey there, welcome guys to another episode of PJS Live Dialogue. This is just my video podcast that I've been doing for the last 2 months. And for those who've been joining me, I just want to say thank you. I appreciate it. I've been having conversations with my friends, colleagues, mentors, and just really enjoying the wisdom and insight that they've been sharing with me. And I really do hope that for anyone who's watching or listening on the podcast, that these have been helpful for you as well. Man, I'm just really excited today. I know I've been saying that for every one of my video podcasts, but today especially, I am so just excited because I think there's a lot of just truth that's about to be dropped right now, and it's going to be raw and it's going to be good. But let me bring in my friend here. You guys, this is Pastor Ray Cosley, and he has been someone that I have known for almost 20 years. Now, I'm going to be honest, we're not like homies. We don't. He and I, we don't like hang out and stuff, but I actually have known him since I was in college. And Ray, I don't know if you remember this, but I still remember till this day that when I was in college, no, I'm sorry. I think it was like a year after I graduated, and there was a campus ministry that I was serving in, and it's called KCM. And you came to preach for something called Chapel, which happened once a month. And I still remember that sermon. Honest to God, I remember your sermon was about the kingdom of God and how we need to, in our mindset, look at everything through the lens of the kingdom of God. And I remember you kept on dropping the same kind of like a hook. You kept on saying, it's all about the kingdom business. It's all about the kingdom business. And you did a good job because that is etched to my memory. I still remember that kingdom business, and I still remember the story that you shared, because you shared the story about you and your wife, and you were kind of making a dig against yourself because you were saying that the Lord has blessed you, and you were wearing like Air Jordans, and then you shared the story where your wife didn't believe you, that you kind of grew up not that way. You kind of grew up in kind of a poor neighborhood, and you didn't grow up with like all this wealth, and she didn't believe you. And I remember that there was one day where she said she saw like a bug on the floor, and then you said, is it heart shaped? And she's like, I don't know. She's like, well, and you start describing the shape to her, and he's like, I think, and you said, I think they're cockroaches. She's like, no, they're not cockroaches. They're not cockroaches. And you said, well, tell me, is it heart shaped? And she said, you know what? Yeah, it does look like that. She's like, how do you know those are cockroaches? You said, because I grew up with cockroaches in my house. I still remember that story. I still remember that. And you were proving to her, man, I did not grow up with wealth. I grew up with cockroaches.
We had roaches in the hood, dog. We had roaches in the hood. Cut the lights on and everybody scatters, boy.
That's right. That's right. Well, hey, I want to kind of give you some time here to kind of introduce yourself to the people who are watching or listening who don't know who you are. Give a little bit about your ministry background, what you're doing currently right now, and then, of course, a little bit about your family. So go ahead.
Yeah. What's going on, everybody? My name is Ray Cosley. I'm a pastor presently at Living Way Community Church, co-lead pastor with my boy James Yim. And the predominant context of our church is Asian, predominantly Korean. And so I've been in ministry there on and off since about 2004. I'm married. I've been married for now 23 years. I got 4 kids. I got a 20-year-old, a 19-year-old, a 18-year-old, and a 16-year-old. These teenagers
Ooh.
are driving me crazy, dog. So, so we got a full house. Um, I went to Biola University for undergraduate. You and I both have a mentor in Pastor Ben Shin. That dude came alongside me, dude, when I first started seminary almost 20 years ago, man. So I went to Talbot, and he just came alongside me and just wanted to integrate me into the Korean context as he was doing campus ministry stuff. And that's when I started doing speaking at UCLA and UC San Diego and stuff like that. And so yeah, presently I'm pastoring and just trying to lead our congregation toward valuing the kingdom of God and making that the center, Doug. So
That's
yeah,
right.
that's just a little
It's
bit
about the
about me.
kingdom business. The kingdom business.
Yes, yes. Come on now.
Man, I probably am gonna assume this, but I feel like you and we've never really experienced anything like this before. Again, I assume that because I don't know where you grew up. Maybe you grew up outside the America, but man, with the combination of the virus and then this fight for racial justice, and then just the tragic deaths of these people, and then the police is involved. It's wild, man. We have like a health pandemic, and then we have like a social pandemic going on at the same time. But
Yeah.
just with the health pandemic, first of all, like how are you doing? How's your family doing? Like your wife, your kids, are they healthy or safe? Are they like kind of going nuts in quarantine? Share a little bit about how your family's doing right now.
Yeah, yeah, thank you for asking, man. Our family, as with anybody, we're quarantined. We're kind of stuck in the household. And myself, I have asthma. Asthma is something that's kind of high within the Black community. And so, being asthmatic with coronavirus being a respiratory virus, we've really had to kind of be careful. And so there's always this kind of sense of anxiety, especially as everybody's getting a little bit more frustrated with being around one another, trying to break out. And so, again, with my girls home, they're wanting to go out. And so my other daughter has asthma. My other daughter has asthma. So, we've been really trying to be cautious, be yet at the same time, trust that God is in control and not get to a point where we are alarmists, I guess, if you will. And so, you know, God and his sovereignty, there's always good for the believer behind the pain and the suffering and the challenges. And as much as this has been a challenge for our family, one thing that it has done, at least for us, is it's created an environment where we can't run from ourselves anymore. Sometimes we stay so busy that there are a lot of internal issues that the gospel has yet to impact that either we don't want to address or we're unaware of, or they're interpersonal relationships within these intimate relationships that we have that have yet to be, confronted, things that have been sitting down deep. And what this did is it just kind of shook everything at the bottom, like, boo boo at the bottom of a fish tank. And all of a sudden, the boo boo rises and the doo doo rises, and you start seeing everybody's funk and everybody stink. And then we gotta go into the funk. Let's go into the stink. Let's deal with it. And so at the end of it, at least we're still in it. But I've seen a lot of hard conflict in our family. I've seen a lot of healing. I've seen a lot of bonding, and it's allowed for some good discipleship to happen as a result of us having to be under the same roof. So, at least for our family, as with all of us, all things work together for good to those who love God. And so, there's a silver lining behind every single one of the tragedies that we find in our lives. And so, we're seeing that as a result of it.
Well, Pastor Ray, I wanted to kind of set this up for everyone because I don't want anyone to get surprised. But for those of you guys who are watching, we're going to talk about some heavy stuff right now. And Pastor Ray knows what I'm going to ask him, so don't worry. I'm not throwing him off or anything. But for anyone who's watching or listening, I just want to let you guys know we're going to be going through some pretty loaded questions. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this today and obviously with Pastor Ray was because these are kind of honest questions that people are asking. And right now, there doesn't seem to be a safe place to answer them. And then, of course, we do know there's bad examples of people who are asking these questions for just the sole purpose to cause heat and cause anger. And that's not where I'm coming from. I definitely want to have an opportunity to talk about some of these things to really be able to create a thorough, well-educated understanding of what's happening right now. And so I just want to set everyone up just to let you guys know that we are going to be asking some sensitive questions. And Pastor Ray knows the question I'm going to be asking, and that's why I'm asking these things, because I trust him and I'm really I really want to hear his wisdom on some of the stuff. Pastor Ray, let's kind of talk about as a black man living in America, and you have definitely grew up with the unfortunate hatred against you because of your background, because of the color of your skin. I, as a Korean, has experienced racism, but as a black man, the racism that you have experienced is just on another level. It's incomparable. It's incomparable. So when you are watching your TV in these past 3 months, watching these stories come about Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, all these people, what were your initial thoughts? What were you thinking? What kind of rose to the surface immediately for you?
Mm. I think probably what rose to the surface initially was, do y'all finally get it? Man, dude, I just feel like there's been so much energy and effort, at least on my part as a black man, to try to convince not only the world, but the Christian world that there is a unique and distinct and a systemic problem with respect to the color of my skin in this country. That there's a systemic problem with the color of my skin, even in the evangelical church. And I just felt like, in so many ways, I've been saying it and saying it and saying it. And people either think it's a non issue, they think I'm exaggerating. Um, a race card, as always, black people, always, so on and so forth. And I just, in that moment, when I looked at that video, and I just, first of all, I wept. Yeah, I could weep right now. I'm sure we all did. Like, just the smirk on his face, it was just so horrific. And I just finally asked myself, is this going to be the opportunity and the time where everybody says, okay, we get it? Because I'm so tired. Again, and this is the challenge for me. I'm in a predominantly Asian context as a pastor, and I'll never forget. And I'm on sabbatical now, so I'm gonna be going in on my congregation on some of this stuff, man.
Yeah, give it to me raw.
But but the about a year and a half, 2 years ago, me and myself and Pastor James and our elder Newly, we went to a conference, and we walked away with this impression and this burden for the church at large, and for our church in particular, to change our values. And one of the values that we talked about is being a gospel revealing community. And we just said, we're going to go in and try to help shift the paradigm of our church, namely, that the gospel is revealed most when people who have no business being under one roof and calling themselves family actually call themselves family and live like it. And there's a history between even Koreans and blacks. And so for me to be in that context, right, and to have the camaraderie and the love and the family, people look in on that and it reveals the gospel, because there's no other explanation why we should be so woundly united but by the gospel. But even in that midst, it's hard trying to get people to embrace that reality. And so we started preaching on issues of race and diversity and racism. And this was about a year and a half ago, just doing different series. And I never forget one individual who didn't like some things that I had to say. He said to me from our church, Pastor Ray, you preached that message and it was about black issues and racism and all of those different things. I just kind of feel like maybe you're a little tone deaf.
What? Oh
Oh,
man.
it's it stung. And it's those types of things that, until we challenge those, does that, talking about coronavirus, bring us up to the surface, there are things within us that if we just kind of go along to get along and be indifferent and be passive and not really bring up those things, that we can tell ourselves and convince ourselves, oh, we're not racist. Oh, we don't have issues. Oh, we think. But then those types of comments. So then I walked away from thinking, I wonder how many more of our people kind of looked at that and thought the same thing when I was preaching on that topic. So yeah, for me, man, walking away, it was just like, I hope finally I can rest and somebody else besides the color of my skin pick up the mantle and say, dog, we see it. We see you.
Man, that is so good, and I think that is a good thing that's happening right now. People
It
really
is.
stepping up and picking up that mantle. You know, something so real was I was in small group last week, and a black sister in my small group said something. She said, this is nothing new to me. She's just saying, I've grown up with this my whole life, and so all of this is normal. Man, when I heard that, I was like, dang, man, that is so real right there. And I just, it was, I mean, what can you say? You can't say anything. It's just so real what she said, so powerful. Um, I mean, as you know, being in a predominantly Asian church, I mean, our Asian culture is quiet, and
Yes.
we like to play it safe, and
Yeah.
we like to avoid conflict. And I really do hope that. I mean, I mean, you're on sabbatical right now, but I mean, do you feel like there are more people in your church that are picking up that mantle? They are getting it. They're kind of like saying we gotta raise our voice.
Yeah, no. I mean, that's been a really encouraging thing for me. I mean, I don't know how many texts, phone calls, emails. Our people, at least, were so broken by the situation that they're not supposed to interrupt me during my sabbatical, but they're like, I don't care. I just need to reach out to Pastor Ray and let them know we feel you,
They show
we
you
see
love,
you.
man. Show you love.
Just show me some love. So, it's been good. It's been dope, and it's been good to see that our people are starting to come alongside this and have a voice. And I think again, which maybe I can mention a little bit later, just even me trying to understand the Asian context and the whole model minority myth and wanting to fit in so you can get in and not wanting to ruffle and make too much noise. And so to see our people, and I think just people in general, man, I'm hearing white voices, I'm hearing Latino voices, I'm hearing Asian voices, I'm hearing all kind of voices like,
It's great.
okay,
It's good.
yeah, so it's been dope. But like that woman said at your small group, it's just it ain't nothing new, man. I got story after story after story after story.
Were you here in California during the '92 LA riots? Yeah, I was here
Oh,
too. I mean, I was a little kid, but I was here, and I definitely understood what was going on. What do you think when you compare LA '92 riots with the protests today? Is there a difference? I mean, the fight is the same, but what do you think about when you compare both of those?
I think for me, again, it seemed to be with the LA riots, it was more of an outcry from the black community primarily.
Right.
But with this one, it's everybody. And
Yeah.
that's the wonderful part about what's happening with this one is everybody is crying out. Everybody is responding um, to the injustice. The other difference too is that you have predominantly blacks that were destroying their own community and Asian owned businesses, which there's so much to that with the LA riots and
Yeah.
the fact that on top of that there was a trial from a first gen Korean woman who owned a shop and she ended up shooting somebody, and so we could talk all about all those details, but that created the groundswell that I think in many ways the the law criminal system used that as a scapegoat to not take responsibility for the white officers and what they did by pitting Koreans and blacks against one another. I got my boy Peter Kim, who's a pastor at Berean. He was telling me about the fact that he was in that trial. And that created this infighting between those Korean owners and the black owners.
Yeah.
And so, healing across that needs to be, done as well. So yeah, I mean, I see some differences in the LAY, but yeah, I was 15 years old, man. So I remember Reginald Denny. I remember when they yeah, threw that brick at his head and kicked him, and um, yeah, it was like going back to the Watts riots, which I wasn't there for that, but just and the sad part for me with that was the fact that the police didn't come in and bring that thing down until it got to Beverly Hills area. Once it started going there, then all of a sudden it shut down. And so it's that type of stuff that is there's systemic racism, man. The reason why people did what they did was because all of those jurors acquitted those officers and they were totally guilty. So anyway, yeah.
You know, uh, Black Lives Matter is going to go down in history, and this is what we're all saying, and it's something that we all support. And I think there's a question that people are asking, and it's not about Black Lives Matter. We all agree with that goal, but it's about the BLM organization. And I think people are asking questions, especially Christians, because when you go to the BLM site, they're I think they have like 15 points. It's like their goals, something like that. I mean, half of them are totally misaligned with Christianity. And so, how do we kind of explain that? Because we we don't want to support BLM organization because it's not a Christian thing, but we definitely support Black Lives Matter. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think at least one of the discouraging parts behind the response to Black Lives Matter, primarily from Christians, at least that I experienced and kind of saw, was an initial kind of backlash to even the phrase at first. It wasn't even the organization. Before it was just an issue of Black Lives Matter, where then there was the retort, well, all
All lives
lives
matter.
matter,
Yeah, right, right.
right?
Yeah,
Or blue lives matter.
yeah,
Um, and the unfortunate part about that is that shouldn't even be necessary for
right,
us to give a proviso and explain what we mean by that,
right, right.
which goes down deep into the lack of sensitivity by Christians and just the world. And so I think with the Black Lives Matter movement, first and foremost, this is one of the things that I think it's unfortunate that there was a vacuum there. Somebody had to fill it. And its response is like, well, all lives matter. That makes it very evident and clear that people in the church and those who say things like that are not going to fill that void. They're not going to be the ones to be sensitive enough to say, you know what? We want to come along a community that's hurting. And so then what happens is you leave that open for extreme organizations like BLM, who come in and they now have a voice because we didn't take the opportunity as the church to jump in there and fill that vacuum and be a voice that constantly was about the gospel at the center and God's heart for every single people, tribe, nation, a God who was about justice and mercy. We could have filled that gap, but
So
instead
good,
we had this
so good.
organization come in and fill it. And so you can't, don't get mad, learn from that and say, you know what, where did we miss the mark? Because here's the thing, why is everybody on Black Lives Matter? Because they're hitting something at the center of what is needed in America to change. So let's just stop right there. And then instead of being so quick to say, well, we need to break this organization down, we're not against them, we're not against, no, let's get to the center and then give the world an alternative. Okay, if these guys are off, and like you said, we already know the LGBTQ, the transgender, and all of those other different issues that support that, Black Lives Matter support, that is unbible, unbiblical, not scripture. We're not supporting that. But what I always try to get people to see is let's get past the organization and get to the point of why the organization was so successful. Why did everybody gravitate to it? Why is the NBA going to put Black Lives Matter on their courts? Why is it that everybody, athletes wearing t-shirts now, Black Lives Matter, because they hit something that was at the core. And sometimes we lose our voice because we're so busy trying to extract what is wrong with something that we can't jump on board with something that's right. That doesn't mean that we justify stuff. And again, you know me, my background, you can listen to my sermons and preaching, whatever. God's word is God's word, and we know what it says. But and that's even again, like we talk about, even with the homosexual community. A lot of the reason why we lost the homosexual community within the church is because we were so busy trying to condemn them instead of trying to love them into the gospel. It's sin. Yes, we know that. But because we had a judgmental, condemnation kind of attitude, they had to go somewhere else and get love. And so that's, that's just the frustration with the BLM. That's the first thing, right when I say Black Lives Matter. Well, that's not biblical. I know it's not biblical. I understand that. But why don't you just take time to pause? I told my congregation, now is the time to pause and listen. Listen. Get to the heart of what somebody is saying so you can hear them. And then you can win them. And then once you've won their heart, then you can begin to change their theology. Then we can start dealing with the truth.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, man.
Oh man, oh gosh, to say that the BLM came in because they had to fill the void because we weren't filling that void. Oh man, that's some truth right there. Man, that's so good.
I mean, you feel me though?
Yeah, for
I mean,
sure.
what do you think? What do you think?
No, no. When you say that, I feel you. I mean, I wasn't thinking that, but just when you say that right there, I'm like, yeah, it's because we either were silent or didn't talk about it enough, or maybe we didn't address it. Or again, like depending on your culture, those are those issues you want to stay away from. Let's just stick to, doctrine of salvation, and just we don't want to get into the real life stuff. It's so true. I think when you bring up that same analogy with LGBTQ, I think for sure that also is the reason why what you said there, to love them into the gospel. Man, I'm stealing that from you, by the way. Okay, I'm gonna steal that. Loving them into the gospel. Oh man, that is so powerful because that's the way I was raised. I was always raised that. Yeah, of course I was a sin, but I mean I was taught in a way like, man, it's like really bad, and I don't even want to talk with those people. And so it's just a result of just years and years of this is how the church operated. And like you said, I'm glad that the church is kind of changing the way it's not just teaching, but changing its ministry. It's changing its ministry. Again, I don't know if you are engaging this with your friends or watching on the news, but I'm seeing it a lot on social media. People are saying it. Famous people are saying it. And what's coming up a lot is these stats. Everyone wants to bring up these statistics. I love what Pastor Rick just said this on Sunday during a sermon. He said, don't share statistics, show compassion. That's what people need right now. You can't meet grief and pain with stats. You got to meet grief and pain with compassion. And I was like, oh man, I love it when he said that. But right now, we hear these common statistics. It's always, this is what I'm hearing a lot. The research and stats on black crime. The research and stats on when we do fund these inner city communities, because that's what we want to do so that it gets rid of the crime. It's not working. It hasn't worked in the past. The stats that more white people die by a cop than black people die by a cop. So there's all the statistics, all these research. What do you say? What do you say to people who start going into all these stats? Because again, people are hearing this research and they're like, okay, if that's true, how am I supposed to respond to this? And so, how would you respond to that?
Well, first of all, stats can be skewed and moved in a direction that wants to support your view. Stats are very, uh, they don't always tell the full picture. I'll give a prime example. Um, Mass incarceration. People say that 50% of all individuals that are in prison, blacks, are for violent crimes. The other 50% are nonviolent crimes. That's a stat. Okay. So then the picture becomes is half of those people are violent, therefore black people overall are violent. And they've even said black people, there have been politicians that have said blacks, because of the color of our skin, have a disposition toward violence. But see, what they don't say is that 50% of nonviolent, those people are circling in and out of the system at a rate that's faster than those that are in violent crimes. So really, if it's a drug offense, they may only be in for a year, as opposed to a violent crime person might be in for 5 years, 10 years. So then now you have how many people have circled through the system under the nonviolent number. If you were to keep building prison cells and allow for that to expand, it wouldn't be this 50-50. But see, you didn't take into account the statistic of the number of years or the time of these various individuals that are being spent. So then you create a caricature of a community based on statistics. So if you people say, well, what about black on black crime? Already what that does is it racializes things. We love to racialize things. Here's the reality. Nobody says white don't write crime. The reality is people commit crimes against people that look like them because they spend the most time with the people that look like them. The majority of crimes against whites is, guess what? By white people, because they're around each other. You get on each other's nerves, you get angry, you get conflict, you got something I don't want, you right next door. I'm not gonna go over to Beverly Hills and steal from some white dude in Beverly Hills when you right next door and got what I want and need. So that already begins to create a character of race. And then secondarily, I'll say this: crime is not a race issue, it's a poverty issue. So then we have to ask the question, why are blacks impoverished in the way that they are? So now let's move it from black on black crime to poverty being the issue of why crime exists within the community. And then this is what I'm gonna do then. Then I'm gonna give you stats on the criminal justice system, stats on the prison system, and how mass incarceration is a systemically race-based issue. Police violence, infant mortality, wealth distribution, redlining in districts, abortion. Let's talk about those stats. And what did all of those things do? They created poverty. How did that create poverty? Because of a racist systemic system around all of those different issues. Mass incarceration, they give blacks, back during the drug wars, 1994, the war on drugs, and a black would get almost 100 times the amount of time for having crack cocaine, than somebody who was white that had powder cocaine. There's this book that I'm reading right now called The New Jim Crow, blowing it wide open. The reality is there was a systemic focus on trying to put blacks and browns in prison for the very same nonviolent crimes that whites were doing, but they weren't getting punished in the same way. And then all of a sudden, now you want to look and you say, well, look at the black community and what's wrong with them. Abortion. 46% of the black population has been killed since Roe v. Wade. Where are the majority of abortion clinics? In black communities. Do we know about Planned Parenthood? Planned Parenthood was created by Sangster. She was a racist. Abortion was designed to actually eliminate the black community. So here you have all of these different things that are against the community. As I said, redlining. We can go back to the Homestead Act and the fact that you basically set a whole bunch of people, 4 million slaves free and didn't give them nothing. Not a thing. And so then now we try to get mortgages going into the civil rights movement, trying to get mortgages. What do? They redline us. You can't buy here, you can't buy there, you can't buy here. So we're going to put you all. And they actually have in Philadelphia in the 30s, they had all the blacks that could buy hazardous area homes. So you see all of these things adding up. And what does that create? It creates poverty. And poverty creates crime. And the majority of those individuals that are impoverished are blacks. And why? Because there was a systemically racist system for decades upon decades upon decades that still exists to this day that's totally created the poverty. So then it becomes less of a race issue and more of a poverty issue, and how we can come alongside a community that has been targeted in a way that's unfair to the rest of America. So for me, that's if you ask, that's what I would say.
You know something that I get really really curious about is how come we see like there are black people who say systemic racism is not real, and then of course there's like the celebrities who think like racism is not real, and then there's all these videos that you're watching. Like I was always curious, like how come they're saying that? The only answer that I could think of is like, okay, are they just really rich? I don't know. I mean, if you're a celebrity, then you are, but these other black people, I don't know who they are. Why are they saying that? I was always curious about what do you think?
Uh, I think primarily one is because we have more opportunity than we ever did before. That's one thing. I think the other issue is the fact that you have certain individuals that have profited from using what we call the black card, leaders within the black community that have used racism as a means to gain power, control, and wealth. And so they call racism when it ain't racism. And so it waters down the reality of racism, and then it creates those who have succeeded to look at the leadership within the black community and say, you guys are just playing games with our people and our race. And so as you guys are explaining it, and as I look at my own life, I'm successful. I've done well. I've risen above. This is not an issue anymore. And these individuals that are using it in a way that totally waters it down to where we can't even see the racism if it even is there. So what's interesting to me, and again, I know both sides. I've followed individuals on the far right, black Republicans, and they have a lot of legitimate things to say. I don't. We're not talking about politics, but I lean in that direction over the years, and so I have heard blacks need to take personal responsibility. Yes, they do. All of these are the different things. Black on black crime. Yes, they do. But the problem that I have with those celebrities and with those other individuals is there's always an outlier. There's always somebody who makes it. But when you look at a system that is entirely destroying overall the community at large, you have to ask yourself why. If we're responsible as blacks, I don't mind taking responsibility. And there is some responsibility that black people need to take. But as I've been looking even more since the George Floyd thing, as I've been looking more and more into it, when you have a system that says this, for example, you're struggling as a black woman, so we'll put you on welfare. You can stay on welfare so long as you don't have the man in the household. If the man's not in the household, you keep getting a welfare check. And if you have more babies, you get more money. That's a system. So what are you saying? We already know fathers are central to helping a community rise. And if you don't have men in the household, I'm sorry, the community is going to struggle. But yet you've created a system where you incentivize being single. That's systemic. I don't, again, as I said, abortion clinics, you're annihilating an entire race. That's systemic. So for you to say there is no racism, at least for me, I have a challenge. At the same time, do we have more opportunities as Black people? Yes, we do. Did we have a Black president? Yes, we did. But that doesn't mean it's a non issue. And that's my challenge. Let's be balanced.
Yeah, I think again, it's on social media. We see these videos, and even for me, I'm watching, I'm listening to this stuff, and the first thing I thought of is like, how come these guys think that? That I was actually curious, like, not that I even disagree with them. I was really curious, like, I wonder why they think that. What is it that they know that I don't know? But just hearing what you're saying there, that's really good insight. There's a lot to reflect on right there. And especially just going back to, like, that I don't know if it was like the 50s or 60s. Actually, I think it was a little bit before that, but like, all that redlining, we were seeing the results of that like 60, 70 years later. And it's just, it sucks. That's the only thing I could say. It sucks. And we're actually seeing, the powerful consequences of redlining. It just is turned into a virus. It is just a nasty, deadly virus that sadly is so big that that's one of the reasons why we're kind of in this situation. People fed up, people fighting back, and of course, the unfortunate tragic deaths that are going on right now. Something sensitive that is personal for me, but I think for a lot of people right now, though, is, we're seeing this narrative being portrayed on the news. And I always tell people, man, when you watch the news, just remember that's like 1 megabyte of the story, and not to take anything away from the deaths of Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and others, but the news, that they have an agenda, and they're painting a narrative. But right now, although we're trying to fight more for racial justice, and we're trying to fight for Black Lives Matter, what's unfortunately happening at the same time is this other narrative where the police is being painted as like this enemy. And it's really personal for me because I have close friends who are cops, and I've been praying for them every day. And they're I don't get to chat with them too much because they're working so much, but when they share stories with me, man, it sucks. It sucks what I'm hearing, and I feel really sad for them because of what they share with me. And so what are your thoughts on how can we fight for racial justice and fight for Black Lives Matter, but not crap on the police at the same time? It's just such a hard back and forth that I have in my mind, because both are important. And of course, I have friends on both sides, and I have no idea how we can make sure that, I don't know if you have any members of your church who are in the police force, but to make sure that these people are not getting stepped on right now, even though there's a huge problem. What do you think?
Yeah, it's discouraging for me. At the end of the day, for me, we got to be Bible, man. We got to be Bible. The thing that should dictate our feelings, thoughts, emotions, and actions is what God says. God is a God of justice, but he's also a God of submission to authority. And we got to balance scripture with scripture when it comes to that. I think a good example of the way it was done well was during the civil rights movement with Dr. Martin Luther King. As much as there was abuse from the police, um, they did it in a way that was civil. Romans chapter 13 tells us that the authority that is on us is given to us by God. So all of these callings to defund the police and even the vitriol and the attitude toward police officers, and this is everybody, including Black people, where there's this lack of a willingness to respect authority that's unbiblical, and it saddens my heart as well. Titus chapter 3 says the same thing. And the only time that we go against the authorities, but yet civilly, is when it goes contrary to the word of God. But you never see the disciples um, disrespecting. In fact, right, when Paul in the book of Acts, I forgot what chapter it is, when he kind of mouths off a little bit and realizes that he's talking to the chief priest, they slap him upside the head. He was like, oh man, my bad, dog. I did not know who I was talking to. So he was, you know what I'm saying? He was going again, he was raging against the machine, but he was allowing for God's definition of what that looks like to dictate how he did it. And that for me is what needs to happen with this. And because we allow our emotions and feelings, because again, I got people close to me as well, uncles, I got a brother-in-law, there are people in my congregation. Um, and I told my congregation, I said, the police are not the bad guys. I said, thank God we got police.
Right. Yes.
The majority of these cats are laying down their lives. These men and women are laying down their lives every single doggone day.
Right.
My sister is married to a police officer. Do you understand what it feels like for her, especially during this time? For her husband, they just had their first kid. So I understand how you saying this is personal. For her to wonder, is there somebody out there that's not going to be operating under the kind of way God says us to when it comes to authority, and I could end up losing my husband.
Right.
So I totally feel you on that, man. It's whack, it's wrong, and it's not scripture. And all we need to do is just let the word of God determine and dictate how we are to do these things. And God, it's God's authority. So to go against it is to go against God. Let's read Romans chapter 13. It says it. It's just chapter and verse. So yeah, it breaks my heart, man.
What do you think about how the governor defunded the police and you took away, like, I think it was like 150 million, and now, reallocating that? What do you think about that? You think that was the right move to defund the police?
So here's the thing. I don't know enough information to make a definitive statement about that. The attitude behind it and the reason behind it, I do question. Is it a response? Is it one that you honestly believe is going to help facilitate a more safe environment for the community at large? Or are you just reacting to the fact that people are acting a fool and you don't want to lose your job, you don't want to lose your position, you don't want to lose your power, so you go along with the crowd? If that's the case, you just need to stand up and stick your chest out and say, this is what's best for the community. And if I have to lose my job, lose my power, lose my political position, then I have to do that. But as we know, with power and politics, people move us. And we have to have our own convictions and values. So I think generally, this call for defunding the police, it's coming from a place of rebellion, and a lack of humility and submission to the authority that God has given to us in this country.
I think what you said there, just you didn't know enough. You need more information. I think that's what I was thinking too. I mean, initially, in a way, I feel like to not fund the police more, but those funds might be necessary to kind of weed these guys out and to get rid of these bad cops, and to make it even more difficult to actually be a police officer. I don't know if it was ever true in California, but in Texas, a long time ago, you actually had to have a degree to be a police officer. You couldn't just go in with a high school diploma. And so I don't know if Texas is still like that, but those type of things, I think we need to raise the bar to make sure that, yeah, we want like the best of the best for this, and to make it even harder. You know, right now, the church, a lot of churches are preaching about it, talking about racial justice. I see all my friends' live services all preaching about racial justice, you know. What do you think? I mean, you kind of said it before, like we didn't fill the void. That's how BLM came in. But right now, what do you think is our next step toward being that shining light with racism, with the protests, with the police? What is the best move right now for the church to be the shining light?
Yeah, that's good. I think number one probably is just changing our heart attitude. Some of our attitude is, well, just get over it. That was a long time ago. It's a non-issue. There's an indifference there. And, for me, 2 Samuel chapter 21, we see an example with the Gibeonites, and how the Gibeonites were a minority group in Israel. And Saul did some really horrible things to the Gibeonites. And as a result, when David became king, um, I'm sure David wasn't doing anything to those people. But yet, this is interesting because not only is it brought to David's attention, it was brought to God's attention. And God actually tells David, it's not a non-issue. What happened in a generation before you, where you did nothing about it, you didn't perpetuate that evil against the Gibeonites. Well, that doesn't mean that they're not hurting, and that we as a people need to not come alongside them and make right what was wrong, because they're still hurting as a result of what Saul did and not David. So I think changing our attitude of, well, what's the big deal? Where we don't have racism anymore to this day, that creates indifference. And not only that, it creates this disdain for the people that keep bringing it up. We can't just erase 400 years of slavery. Do you understand the kind of impact that has generationally? And then again, you wonder why blacks are impoverished and blacks are in prison. And, well, come on, look at just the line. I mean, it's horrific. So I think, that's one. I think number two, I think the other thing for me um, is for other people, and, I'm thinking of other minorities, um, to get in touch with the fact of their own challenges with prejudice and racism that they've experienced. I'll never forget one of the members of our congregation. She said, before, everybody was yelling and screaming about this race stuff for years and years and years. And for me, I just was indifferent to it until one day, me and my friends walked into a restaurant. And as we were walking by a table, someone, as we passed, said, "You need to get out of here, coronavirus. They're Asian." I mean, my heart broke just hearing that.
That's terrible, man. Terrible.
And she said, in that moment, I felt so ashamed of the fact that I've been indifferent toward the racism that blacks have experienced for so long. I need to stop being indifferent because this is my issue too. Minorities need to start owning it by getting in tap with their own challenges and experiences within their context and their culture. Because again, from the Asian context, if we look at it, you guys have experienced racism as well, right? There's a history in this country of that, from the Chinese Exclusion Act to the Immigration Act to the Japanese internment to the Chinese massacres to the restrictions of land for Asians and ownership. Even in Cali, here in California, you guys were restricted from certain things. From, in 1922, I was just looking this up, just you're a victim of segregation under the Supreme Court ruling until the World War II. There's a history that I don't even know if you we need to become in touch with ourselves outside of the black race. Then it becomes not a you issue, but a me too issue. It's a you, like you too, man, me too, dog. That's what causes for black. I used to tell my wife, because my wife is white, and when we first started dating, I think we were over at like Universal City Walk. I took her on a date, Universal City Walk, and every time I walk by a black person, I would go, "Hey, what's up, dog?" And just keep walking. And then another black dude, "Oh, what's up, man? What's up?" Just kind of. And after like 3 or 4 times, my wife was like, "Well, why you keep doing that, man? What's the problem?" And I was like, "Because we all have a single identifying struggle. I can look at you and just know you feel me, and I feel you. And there's a bond that's created by that. We're not going to mobilize until we own it. We own it. If it's not a you issue, then it's not going to be an issue. So, so for me, we got to own it. I think too, also, um, healing from the scars of other people's issues with bigotry. Blacks have committed bigotry against Latinos, against Asians, and against whites too. Again, we have to define our terms: prejudice, bigotry, and racism. Bigotry is a prejudice where you're prejudging someone and then you exhibit discriminatory behavior toward that individual. Um, and there have been scores um, of Koreans that I'm aware of that have dealt with race, have bigoted and prejudice from black people. And I think maybe there's a lot of hurt maybe there to where that can create indifference. So there's got to be a lot of internal stuff. I was reading this article from this Korean American cat who was from the East Coast. He was called, Chink, Gook, all these other different names when he was growing up by black people. Black people stole his bike in the community that he was raised in. So his parents moved him to a Korean American context. He loved hip hop. One time he went to a hip hop concert and wanted to get a signature from one of his favorite Wu-Tang Clan cats. And the dude looked at him and refused to take a picture with him because he was Asian. And he said, being called those things by blacks, it just caused for me to be indifferent and not even want to care. Like, if you guys don't care about me, I'm not going to care about you. And he said, for me, I had to first repent of now my racist tendency because it was perpetuated against me, and realize that they're made in the imago Dei. They're made in the image of God. And I need to heal and even forgive the stuff that happened to me. So I think getting in touch with your own race, ask yourself, why am I indifferent? Are there some scars, something? And I'll say, and I've said it to my congregation, at least from the LA riot thing, and then I saw, man, I'm sorry on behalf of the black community that we went in there and we destroyed people's welfare. I know people in my congregation whose parents went bankrupt and had to deal with that because of the LA riots. And I think it's those types of things that begin to move people toward healing, and then saying, you know what, yeah, now let's rally, let's come together. I think too, also just the Asian, there's this guy who wrote an article called "The Asian American Complicity in Racism," and I thought, wow, that's a little interesting to me. And one thing he says is that we as Asian Americans might not say it out loud, but many of us have internalized a racist, reductionist history. We believe that the way to success is to work hard, and we pride ourselves in having done just that. We came to this country with nothing, speaking a foreign language, and we worked hard, saved money, and we achieved the American dream. And so when we look at the status of African Americans, we dismissively assume that they didn't work as hard as we did, and we just conclude that they are to blame.
It's true. It's true.
Okay, I was like, you tell me, because
It's
I'm not
true.
Asian American.
Yeah. I mean, because the model minority myth that's kind of basically what that is. And like I said before, most of our parents, Asian parents, Korean parents, they're first gen, which means they were the first ones to come here from Korea. So me and my brother, we're second gen. We're kind of breaking into third gen right now, and that's
Mm-hmm.
what it was. Keep your head down, just don't bother nobody, and hustle. Just work hard. Just they said get good grades, and again, I mean, as a first gen immigrant, they don't know anything. So all they know is, okay, just follow the system. These are the good schools. Go to
Mm-hmm.
university.
Mm-hmm.
So
Sure.
if our whole life for 18 years, that's all I do, of course the first thing I think of is, oh, they just, man, I did it. I hustled. Why don't you hustle like me? And that's exactly what the assumption is. You probably didn't work, or it gets even worse, right? If they commit a crime, right? That's your fault, man. That's
Yes.
that's your fault. Why'd you do
Yes.
that? You're so stupid.
Yes.
Um, but again, growing up, I don't have the maturity to think about like what is going on in the macro. I just
Yeah.
think like, you're so dumb. Why'd you do that? I don't think about where their family's from, how they're growing up, poverty. It doesn't happen. And most Asians are doing well because they keep their head down and they just hustle. So therefore, we kind of view everything like that. It's just like, hey, you're doing okay. You don't have to commit those crimes. And so, when you're reading that, I was like, yep, that's exactly right. That's
Wow.
exactly right. That model minority myth is totally right. You know what's crazy, Ray,
Mm.
is that, this is gonna sound so nuts, but the model minority myth for me made sense my whole life,
Mm.
because again, as a kid, would that not make sense?
Right. Right.
It's natural. You just get to work. Don't cause problems. Just do what the teacher says,
Yeah.
and then you do well. And because you do well, you get accepted. And what's crazy is that everything that's been happening these past 3 months, I started to this model minority myth came up, and I was like, "What is that? That's a little bit interesting." And for me to learn about how bad the model minority myth is, I was so blown away, because for me, it's just natural that made sense to me. And
Yeah.
so, I don't know, people who are watching this, they might think that I'm foolish, and maybe that's really embarrassing for me to confess, but it's the truth. As a
Yeah.
39-year-old,
Come
my
on.
whole life, that's what I believed. And I just thought, well, that makes most sense. But when it was explained to me of how bad that was and how that actually causes problems, man, my mind was blown, man. My mind was totally blown.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's funny you say that because I'm reading a book called Yellow right now by Frank Wu. And he talks about the model minority myth because it was blowing me away too. Because I'm like, you know what? And this is again, I think, where change come like what the church needs to do. I'm trying to proactively learn about somebody who's not me. I'm I want to know the Asian American experience in America. And so I got this book called Yellow, and it's blowing my mind about the challenges that you guys have had as growing up and that model minority myth and how it's actually used to pit the races against one another to where now we become the older brother that's messed up and you guys are the younger ones who came in right later than we did, and it's like, look, you guys can't get your act together, but you're still at the kid table because there's a ceiling. They call it the bamboo ceiling for the Asians,
Yeah.
right? You're only good for middle management, dude. That's it. When it comes to education and all that other good stuff, you guys are outpacing even whites. So are you not here? So, and it creates this vitriol, right? This comparison based on race, when really, and he talks about these statistics, at the end of the day, when you have certain dynamics in place, No matter what race you are, you're going to succeed. Period. It ain't got nothing to do with race. It's not because Asians are more predisposed to be better at engineering than anybody else. And so learning about that, going back to, well, what can the church do, is learning about even those subtle, positive racist caricatures that have been created to create division, that you then go under the assumption and start making prejudice, bigoted ideas, feelings, and thoughts towards black people. Why don't you guys get your crap together? So then it becomes, you're not sensitive anymore.
Right.
Like, I ain't got no heart for y'all, man. Get your crap together.
Right.
All right. So I think a lot of it, because here's the thing, the church over the years has been complicit in racism. The church was indifferent during slave times. It propagated it. There were, owned them, all that good stuff. And one of the theologies was, we don't deal with that. We don't deal with that. We just deal with the Bible. We just deal with the gospel. We just deal with salvation. And until we kind of start getting in touch with the realities of how justice applies to the gospel, and we're convinced that it's a Bible thing, doing things is not, everything is ideas. I think the church needs to start changing its ideas and thoughts about racism. Once we're convinced that there's a problem, we ain't never had a problem coming up with how to act. We ain't never had a problem doing that. What was racism? Racism was an idea, and then a system was created around it. So for me, in the church, the fight is the fight for ideas. Let's start getting biblical ideas and biblical realities in our minds and in our hearts. And the church was always good at coming up then with solutions as far as what to do. So, I think those are some things, at least for me, that the church can start doing.
Man, we could talk for so much longer, but I don't want to.
I know. We could.
I don't want to kill our whole night here. Let's get to this. Let's just pretend that somehow CBS, ABC, NBC, CNN, Fox, they all had their cameras on you. You had this opportunity to get like 30 minutes to preach one message for millions of people. You could share one sermon. What would you preach? What would you say right now?
I'd probably proclaim God's vision for his glory, seen in the equality and the diversity of every tribe, tongue, and nation. When we humanize every single individual and at the same time demonstrate that people of every tribe, tongue, and nation are the most magnificent way that glorifies God, then at that point, we have to value every individual and everybody in every life. So I think it's raising people's vision. I would want to raise people's vision of the imago Dei of every single individual that God has made. Because that is where racism is birthed from. The only way that they were able to do that, and again, it even started where poor whites and poor blacks before slavery happened were united. It wasn't until they began to perpetuate an idea and a concept that blacks were less than human. If you can't demonstrate and prove and change people's minds around that, then you're not going to have racism. They had to go there first. So for me, if that's what started the system, the way we reverse the system is by helping people to see that we still have in our own hearts this idea that based on your race and my race, there is a discrepancy, a difference, and I'm better, I'm higher because of what I am. Because I'm Asian, I'm the model minority, which means I'm better than you because I'm Asian. Well, I'm white, I'm better than you because, well, I'm black, so I can do this better than you. And so everything is centered around. So for me, that will be my sermon. Just give me 30 minutes to have everybody feel like they are specifically made and wonderfully made in the very image of God. And let's keep pumping that. And that would probably be where I go. Revelation chapter 5, man.
Man, that is beautiful. I love it. Great message. Please, you should start working on that right now during your sabbatical.
All right.
Hey, I know you're on sabbatical, but let's kind of give a little promo here for your church, Living Way Church. I used to go to that church when I was in college, by the way, back in the day before it was called Servant Church. Before that, man, I was there. I was there at Servant Church, man. So I still remember Pastor James and some of his sermons during that time. But hey, where can people find your church, like a website, and like, are you guys doing online services right now? Give a little promo right now.
Yeah, man. So yeah, we're doing online services, man. Livingway.la. Livingway.la is a website, and every week we're just doing live stream, and we're starting to actually open up now to where we're going to start allowing people to come in and at about 50 at a time, and then you have to sign up and all that good stuff. But yeah, if you want to know more about the ministry, listen to some of the messages and the things that we've preached on. My boy, Pastor James, he preached a message on justice that was off the hinges. So you got to go peep that out and check it out. If you want to hear some of the other things we've had to say and talk about, want to see our values, our vision as a church, and you just want to become a part of the community, man, please sign in and come check us out. Livingway.la, baby.
What time is your service at?
10:30.
Okay.
10:30 on Sundays.
It's streaming live at 10:30.
It's streaming live at 10:30.
Okay, is it just on the website or is it on YouTube?
It's on YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can get to we have a YouTube channel.
Okay.
But yeah, you can get it through the website or through YouTube.
Okay, so for anyone who's watching right now, if you're listening, I'm going to put those links down in the description below, livingway.la. What about you? Can people follow you on social media? Do you have a Twitter or Instagram? Are you on those channels at all?
You know what? I'm not, man.
Okay.
My wife has been on my head about it, and it's just been a discipline of mine, probably just because social media can get so out of control.
I know, man. I know.
And so I've just kind of disciplined myself. But even with you saying that, my wife has been telling me, Ray, it's a good medium. So at this point, I don't, Doug.
Okay. So if it does come up, I'll get that from you, and I'll put it in the description below.
That's what's up.
Hey, Pastor Ray, I'm so thankful again for your time. Thank you so much for being here. Just everything you shared. I'm looking at my questions right now. Just so much golden nuggets just to grab, and I hope that for anyone who's listening and watching, you guys were just taking notes on this insight. I hope that we could do this again. I hope I could continue just to pick your brain, but I just want to say thank you again, and for everyone who's watching, again, just continue just to follow the channel. I've been doing interviews, connecting with my friends, colleagues, and mentors, and if you guys have any questions, write them down in the comments below. We'll try to get to them in another episode, but for the rest, I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye. Boom, boom.